Welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. For those of you that have been following along, you've known that we've talked to a kindergarten teacher, we've talked to a first grade teacher, and today we get to talk to a second grade teacher. So Janelle Clark is a second grade teacher at Big Sky Elementary. Janelle, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, very good. Well, let's get started with some background before we get into the nuts and bolts of second grade. Let's talk a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in the area? Did you come to the area? How did you get to be here in Billings?
Sure. I have grown up in Billings my whole life. I'm a product of Billings Public Schools, K through graduation. So I did leave school and I went to Missoula for college, and then I came back and got a job right out of college. So it's nice to come home and be able to do that.
All right. And when did you know you wanted to be a teacher? When did you know that's something I love this and this is something I want to do?
It was pretty early. I've always loved school. I've just been kind of that little book nerd. Always found it very engaging and socially fun, so it kind of makes sense that I would come back to it. My mom always did home daycare, so we were always surrounded by lots of kids. I started working in daycares when I was in high school, and I just felt like it was a good fit, and this just seemed like the natural progression.
All right. So did you do your student teaching out in Missoula? Did you come back to do student teaching? How did that aspect work?
I did it in Missoula, which proved to be a little bit tricky coming back and getting a job here in Billings, because it's very difficult to get a teaching job right out of college, just with this being one of the best districts and one of the biggest districts. So I was hired a week before school started. I was kind of put on that wait list because nobody really knew what I'd done, and we'd seen different things in different districts. Loved student teaching in Missoula too, but it was nice to come back.
Sure. And then did you start as a second grade teacher in Big Sky, or did you have some other positions along the way?
I started in first grade at Arrowhead Elementary, and I did first grade for 6 years, and then I looped up with my class, and I've been in second grade ever since. This is my 14th year teaching, so I put in 11 years at Arrowhead, and then I bumped on over to Big Sky to try something new.
All right, very good. What surprised you most about a teacher when you actually, okay, I've always loved school and I love being in school and I want to be a teacher, and then there's actually being a teacher responsible for a classroom of students. What surprised you the most about that actual experience when you were in charge of that classroom?
I don't think anything can adequately prepare you for classroom management except for managing your own class. There are 20 different needs, 20 different stories, 20 different days. Every day we have 20 different days. So getting a handle on that, you just can't do it any other way except to learn and to jump in. So that was surprising. And then I think just the dynamic nature of teaching. You think you get in there and you know what you're doing, and then you're going to be an expert, and you are never an expert, no matter what. As soon as you figure it out, something changes: the curriculum, the class, the kids, the parents. So just sort of always being on your feet, always thinking. It's not a job where you can just kick back and do your read-alouds all day. There's a lot more to it.
Sure. What do you enjoy the most about being a teacher?
The kids. I mean, that's probably pretty typical response, but they, especially now being away from them, you realize that that's the part of the job that I love. I love the interactions, the relationships, just those back and forth banter that you don't get now from a computer screen. It's totally different. So forming those relationships, being their caretaker for 9 months, it's unlike anything else, I think.
Sure. And what do you enjoy the least about being a teacher? What are some of the things that are not fun about the job?
Paperwork, the testing, all of those kind of must-dos that I tell the kids, hey, I have to do some stuff that I don't like to. Just a lot of, things that we have to get done that aren't necessarily fun. There's a lot more testing that we do. There's a lot of paperwork and forms and meetings and things that can feel kind of draining sometimes, but I know they're important to the process. But if I could pick it, I'd just be with the kids all day. So,
all right, very good.
Selfishly.
So let's roll it back. Let's think about the beginning of the school year. You've got your new class of 20 kids coming in. How are you assessing their readiness to be in second grade? And how do you assess what that starting point is? Probably you have a great perspective being a first grade teacher and saying, well, here's where they're supposed to be. How do you assess where they actually are when they walk in your door?
I do think it really helps having experience in the grade below, but also just there's so much communication between the teachers, the previous teachers, and myself. I think that is so important that we have a team of teachers and not just individuals. So going to those teachers and saying, hey, I'm noticing this. Did you see that? What concerns did you have? Open communication is huge. And then also just especially listening to kids read the first couple days, just having them sit next to you. It's a great way to get to know them. Pull out a book, read together. Hearing them read you can assess so many things just through that in second grade. Watching them write. So really we just do a lot of fun activities those first few days that involve reading and writing kind of in sneaky ways, and it's so observational the first few days. You know, it's not fill in the bubble, it's let me see, let me watch, let me help you through this so that we can see where they are.
Right. I know you talked to, probably some of the first grade teachers that come from. Do you have any formal, child A was in this classroom the year before, and it's the end of the year, and I know that I'm going to have them next year. Do you have a formal meeting with some of those first grade teachers, or is it more kind of an informal type deal?
It's pretty informal. We have promotion cards, they're called, where we fill it out with their scores and end of year information, and a lot of times we'll just have a see me in the corner. So it really is pretty open to interpretation. But usually, what's coming your way, whether it's something that you need to be concerned about or a special home situation, I just think teachers are always looking out for that and want what's best for the students, so that open communication always helps.
All right. And so once you've kind of, maybe had some informal discussions, done some of that, how do you then manage your classroom based on the needs for each one of those students? Because you probably are going to end up with a vast array of students that, quite honestly, are reading well above grade level, and students who are probably a grade behind. How do you balance that in your classroom to try and move kids more towards where they need to be?
Yeah. If I were to pick another most difficult thing about teaching, that would be it too, is the differentiating. There can be such a range, and you're supposed to teach to the middle, but then we're leaving out so many kids. So I do a lot of centers and workshop model in my classroom. I think a lot of teachers do, where they're doing whole group activities on their own independently, lots of games, lots of hands-on, lots of technology. And then they come back to me for a small group that's more honed into their specific skill. So that way they're getting the whole message, the whole group lesson all together as a group, but then they're coming back and really getting that one-on-one or small group time where we can focus more on their needs specifically.
Sure. Talk to us about some of the strategies you use for the students who need to catch up.
Yeah, so that one, hopefully we have an interventionist or a volunteer in our room, because like I said, they're the ones that really need that one-on-one and small group time. So for those kids, usually it's a lot more hands-on, magnetic letters, very focused things that they are doing with their hands, because it's all of that, we say to, with, and by. So I'll do it to them, with them, and then they can do it by themselves. Yeah. So if you have that help, that is going to be the most important thing, is getting them with someone to self-correct and help guide them through those processes. Interventions are great, but they're hard to get into and hard to come by. So we are always trying to look for ways. Sometimes it's, going with another classroom for a reading group if that's where they fit better, or changing assignments, shortening them, making them a little bit more tactile for those kids. It's really sort of on a kid-to-kid basis.
Sure. Do you see, do you have to do, well, I tried this strategy with this student and it's just not going to work, so I'm moving on to a different strategy. How long do you give those things to work, and then how quickly do you move on to, I know this isn't working, we got to try something different?
All the time we're doing that, constantly assessing ourselves, I think. Technically, most interventions are supposed to last 6 weeks, but, to give it your all, but if it's not working, there's no point wasting time. So as soon as I see that this isn't effective, whether it's through test scores or observations, we're going to switch it up and try something else. I mean, I try and move as fast as we can while giving everything the benefit of a doubt.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other side of that coin. What do you do for strategies for those kids that come in and yeah, it's second grade, but they're reading at a 6th grade level? How do I keep them engaged day in and day out with what's going on in the classroom?
Such a tricky one also. Those high kids often get kind of left out because we're so focused on getting the other kids up to speed, so they kind of have a special place in my heart. Those kids often can exhibit sometimes behaviors because they're bored, so keeping them engaged is super important. Again, with the small groups, that really helps, and usually there's enough kids where they can get that academic interaction because that's what they crave usually, is they don't want to hear A says, you know, so getting those conversations going. Technology has been very helpful in that aspect as well, that we can gear things specifically for them where they can do their own research, kind of passion project things where they're able to explore just a little bit above and beyond. It's just finding the time to do those things. But these kids are usually very independent. So again, they get the whole group message, and then they kind of get some time to explore.
Sure. Going back to kind of the first part of the year, now that they're coming into second grade, they've had kindergarten and a summer, first grade and a summer. Do you notice, I guess, a difference between those kids who they're keeping engaged during the summer versus those kids like, man, the last day of school and woohoo? And what can you do to kind of, is there a way to speed that back up, I guess, once they get back into school?
Yeah, we call it the summer slide, and it is brutal generally. Most kids do drop a grade level, and that's perfectly normal, or not a grade level, a reading level. Perfectly normal, it's to be expected. We should be having fun during the summer. But you can absolutely see kids who haven't picked up a book, kids who haven't written a letter their whole time. It really does show. It's very easy to slip. It's sort of like working out for us, you know. If you don't go to the gym for a week, you just lost all those gains that you made.
Sure.
So it's very simple. I mean, it's just basically constant reading and writing throughout the summer, especially reading. And now, again, with technology, there's a lot of fun math games that we can play, card games, dice games, all of those things that I think we may have done in the past to keep us engaged are super helpful over summer as well, but it's really important.
All right. We've touched on this a little bit, but let's expand on it. What have you had in the past or will continue to have in the future? Interventionists coming into your classroom and volunteers coming into your classroom. How do you invite them in? Are they sent to you? How does that work?
It kind of varies from school to school, year to year. At Arrowhead, I had one volunteer every day during my centers. We just had plenty of people who were able and willing to come in. So we did a game rotation, and they would play a board game with that parent for 15, 20 minutes, an educational, you know, Scrabble or anything like that. And then at Big Sky, I have parents come to me when they want to come. I always kind of throw out an invitation. If you want to come, you're welcome. So I had a regular volunteer this year. And she did flashcards. First, she started with, you know, addition and subtraction, and then we moved into some fluency practice. We had volunteers, our partners in education was with Altana, so they came in and did fluency passages with the kids as well, just to get that one-on-one reading time. And then, yes, we had a full-time interventionist last year, and she did primary in the morning and intermediate in the afternoon, so she had a full caseload, and we still couldn't get all of our kids in that we needed. And then she's moving to part-time this year, so that'll all be sort of reconfigured and reworked.
Okay. One of the things that we talked about with the kindergarten teacher and the first grade teacher was there is a portion of kindergarten that's learning how to be in school. Is that still, how much of your day is taken up with learning how to be in school, or by the time they're in second grade, we've pretty much got this down?
Thank goodness it's more, they've got it down. God bless those kindergarten teachers. Yeah, they usually know the routine. They know what's expected of them. They are able to come in and hit the ground running. I call second grade kind of the sweet spot. They're independent enough that they're able to do that. They know to sit down at carpet, and they're going to last a little bit longer. Their stamina is much better. It's a nice way to start. They've sort of worked out all those kinks in kindergarten and first grade. Thank you, teachers.
Yep. So along those lines, since not as much time of your has to be spent on this is how we go to school, are you able to then introduce other subjects that they haven't had in kindergarten and first grade? Not only because maybe they didn't necessarily have the time, but they probably weren't intellectually ready there. I'm talking about maybe social studies or science or things along that lines. What gets introduced in second grade that they haven't seen before?
Well, luckily with our new project, Lead the Way and Mystery Science curriculum for our science, it does start in kindergarten, so they've got a lot of that basis down, but it moves away from sort of teaching the actual science to exploring and experimenting. It's a lot more of the engineering cycle. So it's less me talking to them and more that, okay, now you know the background, you kind of get how it works, now let's figure it out ourselves. And that just expands and expands. They're doing robotics in 4th grade. So it's just sort of taking things up a notch with science, I think, where they're able to do the inventing and they're able to explore instead of just opening up a book and learning. Social studies is really well embedded into our curriculum, so they're getting a lot of that, but it's less of the how to make a friend, how to be a community, and there's some government and history, biography, so a lot more of that is introduced in 2nd grade.
Sure. What other classes are they leaving your classroom for? I'm thinking PE, or what are those other classes that they're going away to a teacher to do PE, and what are they, and how often do they go?
In 2nd grade, we have PE, music, and library, and they are for a half hour each. So those are the times that they're leaving the classroom. Otherwise, they're mine.
And when they go down to the library, what are the things that they're they just checking out a book, or are they actually doing something?
Oh yeah, there's a lot more in library. She does go over, they have specific standards as well that they're required to teach. So I know that they had a whole packet, a journal that they were filling out with, how to find the books, how to get books at their just right level, what kind of books interest them, different genres, things like that. So I remember coloring a bookmark every time in library and checking out a book, but there's so much more that they're doing now.
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. Are you at all talking with a librarian to say, student A, if they're at this level, this is probably the type of books they should really be looking for? Are you making that type of communication with your librarian?
Yeah, there's sort of different schools of thought on that. Luckily, we have a librarian who she's very open, so I just want kids to love reading at this point. So sometimes they will check out a book that's this big that I know they can't read. They'll take it home and I say, did you enjoy that book? I didn't really read it. And we can kind of have that conversation.
Right, yeah.
So what we try and do is get one at their level and then one that they just want,
Sure.
one that parent can read to them. But yes, the librarian and I and all of her teachers she asks for reading levels, she asks for, any special interests that we can give, and then she can guide them to the right books.
All right. How important is recess during the course of the day?
I'm a big recess fan. I asked my principal if I could say this first. I think we can just read study after study about how important movement is to kids, especially now that screens play such a big role. So getting kids outside and running, not just like sitting there talking to each other, but running and rolling and swinging is so good for their development. And they're really not getting that as much. We don't go out and play kick the can until 8 at night anymore. So that's really important. When we take away recess, I try not to do that, and I bring them out with me, and we're still walking and doing circles. It's very important. I really hate missing out on that recess time.
Sure. What do you notice? Do you have to look at the clock, or do you know when it's recess time? And then what are those kids like after they've come in from recess?
Yeah, they would never let me forget recess, I don't think. They're set just about, they are getting antsy. You can feel it. They'll just kind of start like a wave. When it's recess time, you can definitely tell they need to get out and stretch their legs and be themselves for a little bit. When they come in, they're usually sweaty, tired, we sit down, we read a book, we take our drinks, and then they're a lot more calm and ready to end the day, generally.
Yeah, good deal. What kind of technologies are you using in your classroom, and how do you implement them into your classroom?
Technology has been huge. In recent years, I joined the TILT group, the Teachers Integrating and Learning Technology. So I am learning all sorts of new technology, which has been so wonderful. In K2 at my school, we are iPad based. They kind of move into Chromebooks in 3rd grade, so it's sort of a whole different aspect of technology. So Seesaw has been our biggest benefit, especially during this distance learning. I'm sure all the parents know it by now. Just those journals with communication. They're able to record video, and it gives them an authentic audience. Even before all of this, that's a big part of publishing your work, is that we're not just sharing it you to me and I'm throwing it away or putting it in your file, but they know that it's going out into the world for other people to see. Epic and Raz Kids gives them books at their level. It can read to them. They can take comprehension quizzes. And then I'm just really big on creating with technology. So we call it app smashing. Well, you'll work in one app and then you'll bring it into Seesaw to display it. So they're making movies. We've used green screen before, different like telegamis and bitmojis, where they're more creating instead of just playing with it or moving a worksheet onto an iPad. It's a lot more than that, more interactive.
Sure. What kind of field trips are you able to take with your second graders?
Every year we get to go to Alberta Bear, and I believe that's paid for by Alberta Bear and many different sponsors, and that's always a blast for the kids, free of charge for them. Many of the kids have never been to the theater before, so they love it. And then usually we beg PTA, and they will kind of spring for another one, an end of the year trip to the zoo, or we've done Riverfront Park, something where they're out and about and exploring and having a little bit of fun that way.
All right. I'm guessing that for the most part, the kids that come to you have been at Big Sky for a couple years, and they kind of know, what the culture of the school is, I guess. What happens when you do get a student who's been somewhere else and they come in? How do you integrate them into, this is kind of the way we do school here?
Luckily, kids are really resilient at this age. They usually come in a little bit shy, a little bit standoffish, but they jump right in way better than I think adults do. So what I try and do is kind of pair them up with a natural leader, with someone that I know is going to be helpful and kind and take care of them. Kind of say, this is your buddy today. If you have any questions, make sure that you ask. And really, they just take off. Their kids are a lot less afraid to ask for help, so they will go to their peers and they'll notice what's happening and jump right in. And kids are generally so kind at this stage too. A new kid is super exciting, so they just kind of flock to that.
Yeah, very good, very good. We're almost to where we're wrapping up school, so let's talk about, where do you want your students to be at the end of second grade? What are their proficiency levels? I guess maybe primarily in reading and math, or what other subjects do you say I need to have a proficiency level in at this point when we're at the end of second grade?
Our big ones are reading and writing and arithmetic, just like I think they've always been. So with reading, we're hoping, it's called a DRA 28, which is more complex text. In first grade, I say we learn how to read. In second grade, we read to learn. So it's a lot more making inferences, comprehension checks, reading with inflection. We really do focus on a lot of nonfiction, because that can be more difficult to read with all the vocabulary words and text features. So we want them reading fluently and answering questions about their reading. And then writing is super huge as well, especially as they get into the testing in third grade. They need to be able to format their responses in writing. So they need to be able to write an essay with a topic sentence, details, and a conclusion.
Sure.
And then in math, there's so much, I think, in math, but the big ones are the triple digit addition and subtraction. So, that's what we're going to use for the rest of our lives, but we hit fractions, we hit graphing, but really those triple digit is where it gets tricky.
Now, you've had the ability to be a first grade teacher, so you know what to expect from them coming from first grade. What kind of conversations would you have with the third grade teachers to say, hey, I'm sending my students on to you. What are you seeing? What am I missing, I guess, for third grade readiness?
Yep, and we do have those conversations during our PLC, which is so nice. So we'll get together kind of towards the end of the year and we'll say, what was really great and what do we need to work on? And it's almost always we need to work on number sense, which is, understanding numbers and how they work. It's a lot of mental math. Addition, fact fluency, we just have to have kids knowing these numbers, and that's something that we can't get without repeated practice. It's one of those boring ones that you just have to hit. But we have those conversations too, and sometimes the writing is really strong and sometimes the reading is really strong. It just depends on a lot of times what our focus was. Sometimes we'll set goals for ourselves. We'll say, man, I nailed math. And they're like, well, you forgot writing. So trying to weave all of those things together and make sure that we have a balance.
Right. What do you encourage your students to do over the summer? What kind of things are you saying, you should be working on this over the summer. Have fun, but these are the things I would like to see you work on before we come back to school.
Yeah. So reading, and that's an easy one, but I would just say set a timer for 20 minutes and actually read. Don't just look at the pictures. Sometimes in second grade, they still need to be reading to someone because they will be making errors left and right and they just want to get to the end of the book. So reading to someone is very helpful to read out loud and work on the fluency. And then the basic addition and subtraction, those flashcards that we did when we were kids, they still are a big deal. We just got to get those numbers down. But like I said, there's ways to do that through board games, dice games, all kinds of different ways. It's not just sitting there memorizing anymore.
Sure. We've been through and we are currently in a very strange situation, unique situation, with kids at home and teachers reaching virtually. Fingers crossed, come fall, you'll be back again with your students in a classroom. Anything that you, however, have taken away from the virtual classroom that you're like, that's not so bad. I might use that again next year.
Yeah, so much actually. The first few weeks it was a frenzy of creating lessons. And that was actually kind of exciting. I was getting to use a lot of stuff that I just didn't have time for in the classroom, of creating my own content, of pulling from other teachers. There is so much out there that we just don't have time. So that was awesome to explore those and push that out. That was kind of exciting at first. Now I'm done. But there is just the way that you can use Seesaw, and now all of those lessons are created. They're available forever and ever. So we can pull those into guided reading groups now. We can pull those in when I'm working with a group. They can do that, the things that I designed specifically for them, and not some canned program. I think that's going to be really helpful next year.
All right, very good. If you gaze into your crystal ball, what do you see changing about second grade over the next, 2, 3, 5 years? What continues to evolve about what you want to get done in your second grade classroom?
Yeah. That's a tricky one right now, especially, but I think, the expectations continue to get higher and higher. We keep expecting more and more of them, and as we set those expectations, they tend to rise to them. I'm hoping that we can kind of bring back a little bit creativity, a little bit more autonomy in the classroom. I love that that's kind of what this distance learning has taught us too, is that teachers are pretty good at our jobs and we love what we do, and kind of giving us the trust to be able to work with kids independently. I think that now that kids have missed a bit of school, we're going to have to trust teachers to get them where they need to be. And I love that idea of taking kids where they are instead of just putting them into a grade level and having those expectations for them. So I hope that that's a little bit fluid, that we're really able to meet kids with what they need.
Sure. Are you expecting, if you are in school next year with your new second grade class, that they probably aren't coming in with what they necessarily would have come in on first grade, and you're going to have to spend more time getting to the beginning point, I guess, is a way to say it.
I think there will be some gaps, definitely. Just some concepts weren't presented. So there will be some gaps, and we're going to have to figure out a way to assess that and figure out what's missing. But also, and I've kind of said this to a lot of concerned friends and parents too, this is what we do. This is what teachers do every year. We get a set of kids, and some of them have big gaps, and some of them are way beyond. And we take what we get, and we do the best that we can with them. So there will definitely be some things that we're going to have to push a little bit more and spend more time on, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to come in and we're going to know exactly what to do with them. So.
All right. Well, Janelle, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and visit with us about second grade in your classroom. And I know you said God bless the kindergarten teachers, but God bless the second grade teachers as well. It's not everyone that can control a group of second graders. So thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you to everyone at Billings Public Schools for all of the hard work they've put in during this strange and weird time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You bet.